The cold wind moved through the busy streets of the city. People walked fast, eyes fixed on their phones or their own worries. Near the corner of a small cafe stood an old street piano. It was painted in fading colors, its keys yellowed with time. Many people passed it every day, but no one stopped to play anymore. Beside the piano sat a man. His clothes were worn and his gray beard looked untidy. He had an old army jacket with faded badges. His name was Tom. Once, long ago, Tom had lived a very different life. But now he was just another face among the city's forgotten people. He had no home, no family near, and very little hope left. Every morning, Tom sat by the piano with a small cardboard sign that said, "Can I play for food?" He didn't ask for money. He only wanted a sandwich, maybe a cup of coffee. Sometimes people gave him something. Most days they didn't even look at him. Inside the cafe nearby worked a woman named Karen. She was in her early 30s, stylish and full of confidence. She loved to talk about her new clothes, her favorite brands, and her plans to buy a better car. She worked as a manager there, and most of the young workers respected her. But she often judged people harshly. In her eyes, success meant money, fashion, and power. One morning when she came out for her coffee break, she saw Tom sitting beside the piano again. His jacket looked even dirtier than usual and his hands shook from the cold. She wrinkled her nose and said loudly to her friend Mia, "There he is again. The piano man. Always sitting there like he owns the street." Mia looked a bit uncomfortable. "He's harmless, Karen, he just plays sometimes." People even stopped to listen. Karen laughed. "Listen to that? Please, I doubt he even knows how to play. He probably hits random keys for pity." Tom looked up slowly when he heard her laughter, but he said nothing. His eyes were calm, deep, and sad. He simply nodded once and turned his gaze to the piano keys. That day was especially hard for him. He hadn't eaten since the night before. His hands ached and the hunger made him dizzy. But he still stayed near the piano because it gave him peace. When the sun started to go down, he opened the cover and touched the keys gently. The first note sounded soft but full. Then another. Within moments, the street filled with music so beautiful that even passing cars slowed down. It wasn't loud or showy. It was full of emotion, like a quiet river moving through the heart. Karen, who was cleaning tables near the cafe window, heard it. She froze. The music didn't sound like something a homeless man could play. It sounded like something from a concert hall. People began to stop and listen. A small crowd formed. Some recorded on their phones. When the piece ended, everyone clapped. Tom smiled shyly, nodding at them. A small child ran up and gave him a piece of bread. He thanked the child with watery eyes. But Karen wasn't impressed. She came out, hands on her hips, and said loudly, "All right, show's over, people. This isn't a music stage. Some of us have to work." The crowd slowly left. Tom closed the piano lid and sat back down, silent. Karen looked at him and said, "Why don't you get a real job instead of sitting here asking for food?" Tom looked at her kindly. "I'm trying, ma'am. I used to have one. I just lost a few things along the way." She gave a short laugh. "Well, we all have problems. But sitting here pretending to play music won't solve them." Mia walked up beside her, frowning. "Karen, don't talk like that. He's not hurting anyone." Karen shrugged. "I'm just saying the truth," Tom said softly. "Music once fed my soul. Maybe it can feed my body too." Karen rolled her eyes and walked back inside. She didn't know that her words had just hit a man who once stood on some of the biggest stages in the country. Years ago, before his hair turned gray and his hands shook, Tom had been known as Thomas Green, one of the best jazz pianists in the nation. He played in grand halls, met famous people, and traveled the world. But life had changed when war came. Tom had joined the army, serving his country with pride. When he returned, he found his home gone, his wife ill, and his savings stolen by a partner he trusted. After her passing, Tom lost his will to play. He drifted from one city to another, carrying nothing but a small notebook of music and the hope that one day he might play again. That night, after everyone left, Tom stayed by the piano, watching the stars. He remembered his wife's voice saying, "Promise me you'll never stop playing." He smiled faintly. "I'm still playing, my love," he whispered. The next morning, Karen arrived early at the cafe. To her surprise, Tom was still there. He was sitting quietly, eyes closed, hands resting on the keys. The morning sun touched his face, making him look peaceful. Karen shook her head. "Unbelievable. He really slept here. She turned to unlock the cafe door, but something stopped her. The old piano began to sing again. The tune was different this time, soft and warm. It felt like sunlight in sound form. It pulled at her heart in a strange way. She stood there, unable to move. When Tom finished, he looked up and said politely, "Good morning, ma'am. I hope I didn't disturb you." Karen blinked, not sure what to say. For the first time, she didn't laugh. She asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Tom smiled gently. "From life, I guess. Every note comes from somewhere inside. Some come from joy, others from pain." Before she could reply, a young man from the crowd yesterday came running up. He looked excited. "Hey, sir, that video of you playing last night went online. It has thousands of views already." Karen looked at him surprised. "Video?" The young man nodded. "Yes. People are saying this man plays like a legend. Some say he sounds like Thomas Green, the jazz pianist who disappeared years ago." Karen froze. The name sounded familiar. She had once heard her father talk about Thomas Green with respect. Could it be the same man? She looked again at Tom, his gentle smile, his steady eyes, and his graceful fingers resting on the keys. Her throat felt tight. For the first time, she didn't see a homeless man. She saw someone who had lived, lost, and still carried beauty within him, but she didn't say a word. Not yet. The day had only begun, and none of them knew that this small meeting was about to change both their lives forever. The sun climbed higher, and the morning rush filled the street. Cars honked, people hurried, and the smell of roasted coffee drifted from the cafe. Yet something felt different that day. The air buzzed with quiet curiosity. People whispered about the video of the homeless pianist who had played like a master. Tom sat beside the piano as usual, unaware of how quickly the world had begun to talk about him. He didn't own a phone or know what going viral meant. For him, the day was just another chance to share music in return for kindness. Karen stepped out of the cafe with her coffee cup. She looked at him longer than usual. The video, the young man's words and that name, Thomas Green, stayed in her mind all morning. She had searched her memory. Her father used to play jazz records when she was a child. One of the names printed on the old covers was Thomas Green. She still couldn't believe it. Could this quiet man in worn clothes really be that famous musician? The thought seemed impossible. Yet something deep inside told her it might be true. Tom smiled at her politely when he noticed her watching. "Good morning again, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "Morning. You're here early again." "I don't have far to go," he replied with a small smile. Karen hesitated. Then she asked, "Did you used to play before? Like professionally?" Tom looked thoughtful for a moment. "Once upon a time, yes. I played for people who listened with their hearts. But life takes us to strange places. Sometimes the music stays even when everything else goes." Karen didn't know what to say. She wanted to ask more, but customers started arriving. She went back inside, though her thoughts stayed outside with him. By afternoon, the crowd around the piano grew larger. A few people from local news had come after seeing the viral video. They wanted to know who the mystery pianist was. Tom didn't understand why everyone seemed so excited. He just smiled and said, "I'm Tom. I just play what I feel." Karen stood by the window watching. Something stirred in her chest. She remembered how she had mocked him only yesterday. Now the same man was drawing applause from strangers, not for fame, but for pure passion. She felt a strange mix of shame and admiration. At lunch break, she walked outside again. "You've got quite an audience today," she said, trying to sound casual. Tom chuckled softly. "Seems the world still loves music. That makes me happy." A reporter came forward and asked, "Sir, people are saying you sound exactly like the jazz legend Thomas Green. Are you him?" Tom's hands froze for a moment. The question hit deep. He looked down, his eyes distant. "I used to be him," he said quietly. "But that was a long time ago." "No, I'm just Tom," the crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. People began asking more questions, but Tom raised his hand gently. "Please, I don't play for fame anymore. I play because it keeps me alive." Karen felt her breath catch. So it was true. He really was Thomas Green, the piano legend her father admired. She stood there stunned as the man everyone ignored yesterday suddenly became the talk of the city. Later that evening, after the crowd left, Karen came outside again. The street was calm, and the setting sun painted the sky orange. Tom was quietly cleaning the piano keys with a piece of cloth someone had given him. "You really are him, aren't you?" she said softly. He nodded without looking up. "I was. Life changed after the war. I lost too much. Music was all I had left." Karen's voice was gentle now. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you before." "I didn't know," Tom smiled kindly. "It's all right. Most people don't see what's beneath the dirt. The world moves fast. It forgets that every person carries a story." For a moment, silence filled the air between them. Then Karen said, "If you don't mind, can you tell me your story?" Tom looked at the piano and began to speak slowly. "I was a boy who loved sound more than words. I played every piano I could find. I became known, traveled far, played for crowds, and made records. Then the war came. I wanted to help, so I joined. When I came back, my world had vanished. My wife was gone. My house was gone. The money was gone. I tried to start again, but my heart wasn't the same. So I kept walking. The only thing that stayed with me was music." Karen listened quietly, her heart heavy. "That's terrible," she said softly. Tom nodded. "Yes, but it's also beautiful in a way. I learned that music doesn't belong to stages or rich halls. It belongs to everyone, even on a cold street corner." The next morning, the cafe was busier than ever. Reporters had written about the homeless piano legend. People came just to hear him play. Some brought food, others money. Some even offered him a place to stay. But Tom didn't care about fame or comfort. He just wanted peace. Karen started bringing him breakfast without saying much. She'd leave it on the piano and say, "For you," before going back inside. Tom always thanked her kindly. Slowly, her respect for him grew deeper. One afternoon, as she watched him play, an idea came to her. She spoke to her boss, the cafe owner. "What if we host a small concert right here? Let him play. It could bring more people and we could donate part of the money to help him." The owner smiled. "That's actually a kind thought, Karen. Let's do it." She went outside and told Tom. His eyes widened in surprise. "A concert?" "Here," she nodded. "Yes, we'll call it Music for Hope. You'll play and people can donate food or money for those in need." Tom looked moved. "That's a beautiful idea. Thank you." In the days that followed, posters were put up and people from all around the city promised to come. Karen worked hard to organize everything. She didn't see Tom as a homeless man anymore. She saw him as someone who carried light within him, a light she wanted others to see too. When the concert day came, the street was filled with people. Cameras were ready, children held flowers, and even local musicians came to watch. Tom wore a clean shirt someone had gifted him and sat at the old piano with calm grace. Before he began, he looked at the crowd and said, "Thank you for letting me share my music again. I once lost everything, but today I feel rich again, and not with money but with kindness." He began to play. The music was pure magic. Every note carried emotion, and the people listened in complete silence. Karen stood near the cafe door, tears in her eyes. She had never felt something so powerful. When he finished, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Some cried, others clapped until their hands hurt. Tom smiled and bowed slightly. Karen walked up to him and said, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." He smiled softly. "Thank you, Karen. You believed and that made it possible." As the evening ended, she looked at him with respect and warmth. For the first time in her life, she understood that real greatness had nothing to do with clothes, money, or fame. It came from the heart. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. The night after the concert, the city seemed quieter than usual. The lights had dimmed, but the sound of Tom's music still echoed in many hearts. People who had been there kept talking about it. Some called it the Song of Hope. Others said they felt peace for the first time in years. Tom sat alone beside the piano after everyone left. The air was cool and the street lamps cast a soft glow around him. His hands rested gently on the keys. For a long moment he said nothing, only staring at the stars. Then he whispered, "Thank you, Anna." That was his late wife's name. Somewhere deep in his heart he felt like she had heard the music too. Karen stepped outside quietly, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "You played beautifully," she said as she handed him a cup. Tom smiled. "Thank you, Karen. I haven't seen such kind faces in a long time." She sat beside him on the small bench. "You gave everyone something special today. You made them feel," he nodded. "Music does that. It reminds people that they're alive." For the first time in years, Tom felt something new. Hope. The crowd's love, Karen's kindness, and the sound of applause had awakened something inside him. Maybe, just maybe, life still had a few songs left for him to play. The next morning, the news about the concert spread even wider. Newspapers printed headlines like, "Homeless Veteran Turns Street into Concert Hall" and "The Return of Thomas Green." People shared his story online, amazed at how a man with nothing could give so much. Soon, musicians, music schools, and charity groups started reaching out. A local radio host wanted to interview him. A small theater offered him a place to play again. But Tom was humble. "I'm grateful," he said, "but I don't want to play for fame. I just want to play for hearts." Karen helped him organize his things. She had found a small room above the cafe where he could stay. It was simple but warm. When she handed him the key, Tom hesitated. "You've already done so much for me," she smiled softly. "You gave me something first, Tom. You taught me not to judge people by how they look." Tom looked at her kindly. "That's worth more than gold, Karen." Days passed and Tom began playing every evening outside the cafe. People came not just for coffee, but for the music. The street became known as Harmony Corner. Children danced, couples smiled, and the whole place seemed brighter. Karen noticed something changing in herself too. She no longer cared as much about her new car or fancy clothes. She found joy in helping others, in simple smiles, and in the power of kindness. She began to volunteer at a local shelter, often bringing food and music. Tom sometimes went with her and played for the people there. One evening, while Tom played a soft tune, a man in a black coat stood at the edge of the crowd. He looked around 60 with gray hair and sharp eyes. When Tom stopped, the man stepped forward. "Mr. Green," he said carefully. Tom looked up surprised. "Do I know you, sir?" The man smiled. "My name is Martin. I'm a music producer. Many years ago I watched you play in New York. You were the best pianist I'd ever seen. When I saw that video, I couldn't believe my eyes. I had to come and meet you." Tom blinked, unsure what to say. "That was a lifetime ago, Martin." "I'm not the same man anymore," Martin shook his head. "Maybe not, but your music still has power. I want to help you record again. Not for money or fame, but for the world to hear your heart." Karen's eyes widened. "That's an amazing offer." Tom smiled gently. "I'll think about it. I only play if it brings peace, not pressure." Martin nodded. "That's fair. But think carefully. The world needs your sound again." After he left, Karen said, "You should do it. People need your music." Tom sighed softly. "I don't know if I belong on a stage anymore," she smiled. "Then don't play for the stage. Play for the soul." Those words stayed in his mind all night. He sat by the piano in his small room, his fingers moving over the keys, playing softly to himself. The notes flowed like memories, some sweet, some sad. He realized he wasn't afraid of playing again. He was afraid of being hurt again, but he also knew that music wasn't meant to be locked away. The next day, Tom found Karen in the cafe. "Tell Mr. Martin I'll do it," he said quietly. "But only if it helps others." Karen's eyes brightened. "You mean it?" "Yes," he said. "Let's make music for hope." In the following weeks, they worked together. The cafe became their small base. Tom practiced there every morning, and people gathered to listen. Karen arranged meetings and made sure he ate well. The kindness between them grew naturally, built on trust and respect. Finally, the day of recording arrived. The studio was simple but filled with good people. Tom sat at a grand piano under soft lights. Karen watched from behind the glass window, smiling proudly. When he placed his hands on the keys, everything around him disappeared. He played like a man reborn, each note telling a story of loss, love, and redemption. The sound was so deep that even the engineers stopped working just to listen. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then the sound of applause broke out, not loud or wild, but full of warmth. Tom looked up, his eyes shining. Karen entered the room and said softly, "That was perfect, Tom." He smiled. "It wasn't me. It was life playing through me." The album they recorded was called Songs of Second Chances. It wasn't released by a big company. Instead, Martin and Karen helped share it online for free, asking people only to donate food or clothes to those in need. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people listened and sent help to shelters all across the city. One afternoon, as Tom and Karen watched the news showing volunteers handing out food, she turned to him and said, "You see what you did? You changed lives again. Tom shook his head gently. No, Karen, we did. You believed when no one else did. The cafe owner decided to host another concert, this time to raise money for veterans who needed support. Karen helped plan everything while Tom practiced every night. The crowd grew larger each time he played, and his smile grew wider too. One night after the last song, Karen asked quietly, "Do you ever miss your old life?" Tom looked thoughtful. Sometimes, but I think I had to lose it to understand what really matters. Back then I played for applause. Now I play for peace, Karen nodded slowly. You taught me something, Tom. I used to think success was about being better than others. Now I know it's about lifting others up. Tom smiled. That's the true music of life. As the months passed, their friendship grew stronger. People began calling Tom the street maestro, but he always said, "I'm just Tom." The city that once ignored him now cherished him. Children greeted him, strangers waved, and the piano by the cafe became a symbol of kindness. Late one evening, Karen watched him play a soft melody. The streetlights glowed and the music drifted like a warm blanket through the night. She thought about how far he had come, from a lonely man asking for food to a living legend giving hope to others. She smiled to herself, realizing that the world sometimes hides miracles in plain sight. And this time she was lucky enough to see one. Weeks turned into months and Tom's music began to spread far beyond the little cafe on Harmony Street. His soft piano tunes were now heard in schools, hospitals, and shelters through the recordings shared online. People from other cities wrote letters saying how his music helped them find peace in dark times. Karen often read those letters aloud to him while he sat at the piano, smiling quietly. "You've touched so many hearts, Tom," she said one evening as she folded the latest letter. "Look at this one. From a teacher in another city. She says her students listen to your music during class to stay calm." Tom chuckled softly. "That makes me happy. I used to think my time had passed, but maybe every sound finds its way when it's needed." The cafe had changed too. More people came, not just for coffee, but for the feeling that the place gave them. It had become a small community of kindness. Every night Tom played a few songs and Karen managed the crowd with a calm smile. She was no longer the proud, cold woman she once was. She had learned to see people for who they were, not what they owned. One chilly morning, as Tom sat by the piano, a letter arrived for him. Karen brought it out with his tea. "This came for you," she said. Tom looked at the envelope. The handwriting was neat but shaking. When he opened it and began to read, his eyes widened. He went silent for a long moment. "Is everything all right?" Karen asked softly. Tom nodded slowly. "It's from someone I never thought I'd hear from again." "My son." Karen blinked in surprise. "Your son?" "Yes," Tom said quietly. "When I lost everything, I also lost him. He was very young when I left for the war. After his mother passed, I couldn't face him. I thought I had failed him." Karen's voice was gentle. "What does he say?" Tom looked down at the letter. "He says he saw my video online. He didn't know I was still alive. He wants to meet." Karen smiled softly. "That's wonderful news." Tom took a deep breath. "It is, but I'm afraid. I left him when he needed me most. I don't know if he can forgive me." Karen touched his arm kindly. "Tom, people change. Maybe this is your second chance." Tom nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right." A few days later, they arranged to meet. Karen came along to support him. They waited at a small park near the river. Tom wore a clean jacket and held the letter in his trembling hands. The trees were bare, and the air smelled of winter rain. After a few minutes, a man in his 40s appeared. He looked tall, with calm eyes that seemed familiar. He walked slowly toward them. Tom stood up, his heart racing. "Dad?" the man said in a quiet voice. Tom's lips trembled. "David," he whispered. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Then David stepped forward and hugged his father tightly. "I thought you were gone," he said. "I almost was," Tom replied. "But something brought me back. Music and kindness." Karen stood nearby, smiling with tears in her eyes. It was a moment she would never forget. They sat on a bench and talked for hours. David told him about his life, how he became a teacher, how he had a family of his own, and how he had always kept one of Tom's old records. "I used to listen to your songs when I missed you," David said. "I didn't understand why you left, but I never stopped hoping you'd come back." Tom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, son. I thought I was protecting you from my broken life. But I see now that I was wrong." David smiled gently. It doesn't matter anymore. You're here now, and that's what counts. Karen watched them, her heart warm. She saw something beautiful. A family finding its way back together after years of silence. Over the next few weeks, David visited often. He brought his wife and 2 children to meet Tom. The children loved hearing him play and called him Grandpa Tom. The old man's laughter filled the cafe every time they came. Karen was happy to see him like that. Yet she also noticed that Tom's health wasn't as strong as before. Some nights his hands trembled more and he coughed quietly when no one was watching. One evening she asked, "Tom, are you feeling all right?" He smiled softly. "Just tired, my dear. My body is slower, but my heart is still full." Karen didn't push him further, but worry stayed in her eyes. Soon, an invitation came from a big music event in the city. They wanted Tom to perform a final piece, a tribute to hope and human kindness. The event was called Voices of the Street. It was a gathering of artists who once had nothing but found a second chance. Karen showed him the letter excitedly. "You have to do this, Tom. It's perfect." Tom read the letter quietly. "It would be my last concert," he said with a small smile. "Last? Don't say that," Karen said quickly. He looked at her kindly. "Every song has an ending, Karen, but I want mine to be full of love." The day of the event arrived. The hall was filled with people from all walks of life, musicians, students, families, and even some of the homeless who had once sat on the street with Tom. The stage lights glowed softly, and in the front row sat Karen, David, and his family. When Tom stepped on stage, the crowd stood and applauded. He looked around with humble eyes and spoke into the microphone. "I once thought my life was over. I had lost my home, my family, and my purpose. But I learned something important, that even when you fall, kindness can lift you again. I play this for every soul who believes it's too late. It's never too late." Then he sat down and began to play. The music filled the hall like sunlight through clouds. It was gentle and full of life. Each note told a story of loss and healing, of war and peace, of falling and rising again. People listened in silence, many with tears in their eyes. Karen couldn't look away. She remembered the day she had laughed at him, thinking he was just another beggar. Now she watched him as the man who had taught her the true meaning of value. When the last note faded, the hall remained silent for a few seconds. Then came thunderous applause. People stood clapping and cheering. Tom smiled, bowing his head slightly. His eyes found Karen in the front row. She smiled back proudly. After the concert, Karen and David went backstage. Tom looked tired but peaceful. Karen said softly, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Tom smiled faintly. "Thank you." "It was my gift to life," David hugged him. "You gave the world your soul, Dad." Tom touched his son's hand. "And you gave me my reason to live again." Later that night, as the crowd dispersed, Tom stood alone near the piano. The lights dimmed and he touched the keys one last time. The sound was quiet, almost like a whisper. Karen walked up beside him. "Are you ready to go home?" He looked at her and smiled. "I already am home." They walked out of the hall together, the cold night air brushing gently against their faces. The city lights shone bright and Tom's heart felt light. He had found peace at last. Peace through music, through forgiveness, and through the kindness of a woman who had once laughed at him but now called him a friend. The morning after the grand concert, the city felt alive with warmth and hope. People still talked about Tom's music, how it made them feel light inside. Newspapers printed headlines calling him the street maestro who healed the city. Videos of his final performance spread everywhere. In schools, cafes, and homes, his songs played softly in the background, reminding everyone that kindness and second chances could change lives. Karen walked through the cafe doors early that morning. The piano outside was silent, but she smiled as she looked at it. She placed a small vase with fresh flowers on top of it. The air was cold and the streets were still empty, but she felt peace. Inside, she made 2 cups of tea out of habit, just like every morning when Tom would come by. She looked toward the door, almost expecting to see his calm smile and gentle nod. But he wasn't there yet. She waited a little while longer. Then she sighed and decided to take 1 cup of tea upstairs to his small room. She knocked lightly on his door. There was no answer. She knocked again. "Tom, it's morning. I brought your tea." Still no reply. Her heart began to beat faster. Slowly, she opened the door. Tom sat by the window, sunlight touching his face. His hands rested on his knees and there was a faint smile on his lips. He looked peaceful, almost like he had fallen asleep listening to the music of the world. But Karen knew. He was gone. The cup of tea slipped from her hand, spilling on the floor. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Oh, Tom." She walked closer and saw that a piece of paper lay on the small table beside him. It was a handwritten note. She picked it up with trembling fingers and read, "Dear Karen, if you are reading this, I have gone to join my wife in the music that never ends. Please don't be sad. You gave me back my purpose. You reminded me that kindness still exists. Thank you for believing in me when I was invisible. I leave my piano to you. Keep it open for anyone who wants to play, no matter who they are or how they look. Music belongs to everyone, and so does hope." Your friend Tom. Karen pressed the note to her chest and cried quietly. It wasn't the cry of sorrow alone, it was the sound of love, gratitude, and respect. She sat by the window for a long time, watching the sunlight spread across the city. When word spread that Tom had passed away, the city fell silent for a day. People came from near and far to place flowers by the old piano outside the cafe. Children drew pictures of him, veterans saluted his memory, and musicians played his songs in the streets. He had touched more lives than he ever knew. Karen organized a small memorial at the cafe. The piano was cleaned and decorated with candles and photographs of Tom playing. The same people who had once stopped to listen to him gathered again, this time to say goodbye. David came with his family. His eyes were full of sadness, but also pride. He stood beside Karen and said, "He was always a legend, but now he'll be remembered for more than his music. He'll be remembered for his heart." Karen nodded softly. "He changed mine forever." When the crowd gathered around the piano, Karen stepped forward and said a few words. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with every sentence. "Tom came to this street when no one saw him. He asked for food, not money. But he gave us something much greater than we could ever give him. He gave us hope. He reminded us that kindness can lift a broken soul. He taught us that greatness is not about fame, but about compassion. Let this piano stay here forever as his gift to us all." She placed Tom's note on the piano and took a deep breath. Then she sat down on the bench and touched the keys gently. She had learned a few simple songs from watching him. Slowly, she began to play the first melody he had ever played on that street, the one that had stopped the city and started it all. The tune filled the air again, soft and full of heart. As she played, people began to hum along. Some cried, some smiled, and some closed their eyes, remembering the man who had turned a cold street corner into a place of warmth and peace. From that day on, the cafe became known as Tom's Corner. The piano stayed outside, always open for anyone who wished to play. Homeless people, students, old musicians, and even children came to sit at it. Some played joyful songs, some played sad ones, but every sound carried a piece of Tom's spirit. Karen made sure no one was ever turned away. She remembered Tom's words, "Music belongs to everyone." She carried them in her heart like a promise. One afternoon, a young boy came to the cafe. His clothes were torn and his face looked tired. He stood near the piano and asked softly, "Can I play for food?" Karen froze for a moment. Those were the same words Tom had once written on his cardboard sign. She smiled gently and said, "Of course. Play as long as you like." The boy sat down and began to play a soft tune. It was uneven and rough at first, but then as his fingers found the rhythm, the sound grew beautiful. People passing by stopped to listen. The air filled with the same feeling of peace that Tom's music had once brought. When the boy finished, Karen gave him a sandwich and a cup of tea. He looked up shyly and said, "Thank you, ma'am." She smiled warmly. "No, thank you. You reminded me of someone very special." As the boy walked away, she looked at the piano and whispered, "You're still here, Tom. Every note, every smile, every act of kindness, it's all you." Years passed, but Tom's story never faded. His music continued to travel, inspiring people all around the world. A small foundation was started in his name, the Tom Green Music for Hope Fund, which provided free instruments to children from poor families. David and Karen managed it together, keeping his dream alive. Every year, on the same date as his last concert, people gathered at the cafe for a special event called the Day of Hope. Musicians from all walks of life played songs in his memory. Karen always started the event with Tom's favorite piece. When her fingers touched the keys, she could almost feel his presence beside her, smiling gently as he always did. One quiet evening, after everyone had gone home, Karen sat by the piano under the streetlights. The city hummed softly around her. She closed her eyes and began to play one last song, a song she had written herself called "The Melody Lives On." It was simple and warm, full of love. As she played, a gentle wind moved through the street, carrying the notes away. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "You did it, Tom. Your music never ended." Above her, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too were listening. And for a moment, it felt like the whole city was singing along with the spirit of the man who had once asked, "Can I play it for food?" He had come to the street with nothing, but he had left behind everything that mattered: hope, kindness, and the reminder that even the smallest act of compassion can create a song that never dies.